Hey, thanks for tuning in. In this video I would like to show you how you can set up Unreal GameSync for Git. So it's basically not really Unreal GameSync that you know from Perforce, but it serves the same purpose. And the purpose is of syncing game and editor binaries among your team so that your team members who are not technical don't need to have all the developer setup dependencies installed like Visual Studio and so on, and that they don't need to compile the binaries, because this is a process that can take very long, especially if you have a slower machine. So this example is not showing you a project where you build the Unreal editor from source, but the whole process is pretty similar. It just involves a few more steps. In this project, we will assume that you use the Unreal editor from the Epic Games launcher. So what are the things that you need? So first of all, your project needs to be version controlled with Git. So you can use GitHub, you can use Azure DevOps, Git assembler, any kind of basically Git source control provider, but the project needs to be versioned with Git and not with Perforce or any other version control solution. Then you need a storage for your game binaries. And in this case, we're going to pick Backblaze. Backblaze allows us to use an S3 bucket, and an S3 bucket is also available on AWS, for example, or on Azure or on Google Cloud. The benefit of an S3 storage is basically that it's cost effective and that your end users, your artists, they won't need to deal with any setup and so on. So it's basically pretty simple to set up also on your end. Then we will use Anchorpoint as our main Git client and as the one which will also sync the binaries and bring them all together. So Anchorpoint will take the source files from Git because it can pull and push files from Git. And then we will take the binaries from Backblaze and then launch Unreal Engine. So the first thing that we need is to check our gitignore. For that, let me open up the project here and then open up gitignore file. And here just make sure that binaries are excluded to be pushed in the repo. And in some gitignore cases, it could be that the plugin binaries are whitelisted. You remove that if you see this basically here. Right, then let me close that and let me set up Anchorpoint right now. So let's go and open up Anchorpoint. And here you need to make sure that you have a Git project already set up. So that basically Anchorpoint is your default Git application. Then we're going to enable the binary sync module. For that, go to your workspace name, click on that and click on workspace settings. And then click on actions and then scroll down until you see Unreal binary sync. Enable that. And then we're going to check the settings. The first thing that we need to define is the tag pattern. And this is basically a tag base name. Technically, it works like this. We have a set of Git commits. And when we have a commit where a binary has been built to, we add a tag to that commit. This way, Anchorpoint knows that on this commit, there is a binary, so we need to check Backblaze for that particular binary. And because Git tags need to be unique, so you cannot apply the same name on a commit, we need to define a base name. And then it will add numbers like 1, 2, 3, and so on, so that we have the uniqueness of Git tags and that we have also an identifier that binaries are attached to a commit. Next thing is the binary location. We're going to pick the S3 cloud storage. We could also use a shared folder, which we need to define in the project settings later. A shared folder could be something like a folder on your NAS or on your Google Drive, Dropbox, basically whatever. But we want to use an S3 bucket on Backblaze. That's why we pick S3 cloud storage. So now we need to define the S3 access credentials. And for that, we're going to create a Backblaze account. So open your browser and then go to backblaze.com and go to products, B2 cloud storage. And here you can basically create an account. There is also a free version, which is totally enough for this tutorial. Then, if you already have created an account, go to your backend where you have your B2 cloud storage buckets. So click on buckets and we're going to create a new bucket here. We just give it the name binary sync because that's fine. We can leave all the settings as they are here. We don't need any encryption in this case. Then click on create a bucket. All right, our bucket is created. And now we need to transfer the settings to Anchorpoint. Let me select first of all the bucket name. Copy this over, paste it here. The next thing is the bucket endpoint. Copy this over. And here's one catch. You cannot just paste it over. On Backblaze, you need to enter HTTPS upfront. So that's basically how it's defined in the documentation and how it definitely needs to be done. Otherwise, this won't work. Then we need to enter the secret key and the access key. So for that, let me go back to Backblaze. And now let me click on application keys because I would like to create one. So let me go down and create a new application key. We can also name this binary sync. The name doesn't matter in this case. Let me create a new key here. And then here we have it. Key ID is the access key. And application key is the secret key. The namings are different because these are typical standard S3 namings. Backblaze basically uses a bit different namings for the B2 cloud storage. All right, you can close this because the settings will be transferred over. And let me close this as well, and then come back to the project. So what we want to do is, first of all, compile and push binaries to the bucket. We go to the project settings. We see now that we get an Unreal section, and we would like to add the binary push button. And it tells us that we need to refresh the project. We're going to do this later. So here you need to define also the engine directory, because we need the engine to compile our game code. So provide the engine directory here. For me, it's Unreal 5.6. And then let me close that and then just refresh the project by simply switching the tabs. And now we get basically two buttons. So what we get here is also the push binaries button. And this is the one which will compile binaries and push them to our Backblaze bucket. When I click on that, it will open up the console and start compiling the binaries. So our binaries have been submitted. Let me take a look at Backblaze and then go back to our buckets. And then go to our bucket here. We can click on upload download. And here you can see that the zip file of the binaries has been submitted. It has the commit ID as the name so that we can also identify it back. So how do we sync the binaries? Let me go back to Anchorpoint here and let me delete the binaries folder. When I delete the binaries folder, I need to make sure that Unreal Engine is also closed. Otherwise this won't work. So let's get rid of the binaries folder. And then what you can also see here that there is a tag attached to this. So if you don't see this tag, simply refresh the timeline, that it basically gets updated, and then you also should see the tag here. So we just need to click the pull binaries button, and then it will take and download the binaries from Backblaze. So it basically has done this. It added the binaries folder, basically with the whole subfolder and all the content here. And then we should be able to run the game. So what you can also do as an artist, first of all, when you go to the project settings, go on Unreal, you don't need a binary push button. And what you can do is also enable binary sync on pull. This means when you get a new Git commit, that it automatically syncs the binaries. And when the binary sync is done, you can also launch your project. So Anchorpoint will run your Unreal Engine project immediately after the sync. This is basically all an artist needs to do. They just need to pull to the latest Git commit, and most of the things will happen in the background. Otherwise, you can always click on pull binaries. It will then grab the latest binaries from Backblaze. All right, I hope this video was helpful for you. Thank you for watching.